Welcome everybody. In case you don't know me, I'm Lisa Carezzi. I teach in the photography program and I'm the director of undergraduate studies. And this evening came about because of a guest that I had last semester in senior seminar, which is what maybe half of these people are here for, senior seminar. An artist from Mass MoCA came, Kim Fowler, and we were doing like a career professional practice workshop, and she says, "Oh, you've got to get this book. You've got to get this book by Sharon Louden." And I'm like, "Ooh, what? She went to Yale. How do you not know this?" And I get very like blinders on about photography, so I apologize, but I'm learning. I'm still learning. So Kim told me about this book, Living and Sustaining a Creative Life. And so I looked up Sharon, and it turns out her book is out in its second iteration, which is called Artist as Culture Producer. And since everything's connected and it's a big, small Yale world, I wanted to bring Sharon and her roadshow here. Last year, the book tour was 62 stops.
It ended in, I have to remember now, it ended in 15, I think it ended in. So 62 stops over 18 months.
So you're in a new book tour now?
New book tour, 94 stops. This is, I think, the 44th or 45th. We have a long way to go. We're halfway through about.
And so Yale had to be one of those stops. So here we are.
Thank you.
Yes. So Sharon's work has been exhibited widely, from the Drawing Center to the National Gallery of Art, and she's in the collections of the Whitney and the Museum of Fine Arts Houston, among many others. She's a senior critic at the New York Academy of Art and a recipient of a 2017-18 Sharp Willentis Foundation year-long rent-free studio space in Dumbo. Next to Sharon is Ellen Harvey, who was at Yale actually in the law school. She has also exhibited extensively, including the 2008 Whitney Biennial. She's had shows at the Barnes Foundation and the Corcoran, among many others, and has created many public artworks, including New York City Arts for Transit and a piece at the Philadelphia International Airport. She is a 2016 Guggenheim Fellow, and she has a solo show opening on October 26th at Denacy Corey in New York. Next to Ellen is Chloe Bass, and she actually was a Yale College student, not a School of Art student. She got her BA in theater studies, and she's a performance artist whose work has been included in shows at the Q Art Foundation and the Southeastern Center for Contemporary Art. She is a 2017-18 workspace resident at the Center for Book Arts and is an assistant professor at Queens College. And she's a current resident at the Triangle Art Association. And Angela Fraleigh replaces Alpesh Patel, who is stuck in Florida, unfortunately. But we are thrilled to have her here from Allentown, PA. And she has a +1 under that scarf there. She's shown at PPOW and Massimo Odiello Gallery, among others. She's been nominated for the Joan Mitchell Foundation Award, the Lewis Comfort Tiffany Grant, and was awarded at Yale the Alice Kimball English Travel Grant, which is very cool. And she is also a 2017-18 Sharp Willentis Dumbo Studio resident, and a mom of a 7-week-old and a 5-year-old. So please welcome our panelists, and I'll sit down and Sharon will moderate.
Thank you so much. Lisa, thank you so much. I have to say it's just been such a pleasure doing this, planning this with Lisa. It's been a long time. When did we start this conversation?
April, May,
yeah,
March.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for having us. So I haven't been back here in a long time. I mean, I did an event at Art Space, but I sort of ignored the Yale part. Not to say it because I didn't like Yale, but I just didn't know how to sort of deal with it because I haven't been back here. Because I think it's pretty monumental to go to this school, at least for some people. And I want to be able to talk about our experiences, all of our experiences today, from when we were at school. So because this is an alumni panel discussion today. As Lisa said, this is part of a big conversation tour that's actually happening in this country and then also Australia, Istanbul, 7 Alaskan American communities in, in Alaska. I'm tongue-tied already. 7 communities in Alaska, and as well as I think we're going to go to Seoul, Korea as well. That's coming up, will be next year. But the reason for this is that in 2011, I was approached to write a book, and I can't even write an artist statement, let alone a book. And even my husband, and is anybody here married, or you have a relationship with somebody? Some of you will admit to that. Well, maybe when your partner says you can't do something, you do it, right? I don't know if you do that, but I do that. So when my husband, who's right here, said, there's no way you're going to do a book. I was like, oh, hell yeah, I'm going to do a book then. Thank God I did that book. So
I never said that.
Yes, it's true. I did a panel at the College Art Association in 2011, and it was called How to Make a Living With or Without a Dealer, and 400 people showed up at that panel, and I'll never forget saying to the audience, wow, it's really good that you're here, and it really sucks that you're here, because it means you're dependent on this system that I think is decaying, and in fact, I know it is decaying, and even though that might crush some of you, there's a lot of benefits to me saying that. And we can talk about that today if my colleagues feel that way. But anyway, so my publisher was in the audience. You never know who's in the audience. And she came up to me and said, do you want to write this book? And then I decided to do this book, which is not written by me. It's 40 essays by artists who are starting a conversation how to live and sustain a creative life. Ellen is a contributor to my first book, and Chloe to my second book. And the reason for that book was that I felt as though when I moved to Yale, I moved from Yale to New York with $115,000 in debt after leaving Yale. That's $206,000 today. I paid those debts off in 10 years. But in 1991, when I moved to Williamsburg, where at the time, no cabs would go to Williamsburg, and there were lots of prostitutes at that time, and cars were stolen like that. Very different world than it is today. There weren't a lot of givers, I found, in my community of artists. I was annoyed by that. And I felt that even today, I feel that artists are not sharing enough, and there isn't enough cultural reciprocity between us in our community. And also I wanted to find out how artists were sustaining creative life. I didn't see any books on the shelves. I saw a lot of books of professional development on the shelves telling me what to do as an artist, but not what the reality was or is as artists. So anyway, this book now is in its 7th printing, and I'm really proud of that. I made this a shared project. I split the royalties, which are only 8% for the first book, 10% for the second book. That's actually average for an academic book. Split them with all of the contributors to the book, and then everybody gets their own copyright. This tour is fully sustainable, except for the first event at the Strand, which was really a celebration. It's also being recorded for a case study, which will be published next year. And I think what I'm going to do for that case study is there's a person from my first book who wants to collaborate to make it an art piece. So we're going to do that, actually, instead of just making a report and just handing it off. The point of these books for me is not only to share these projects, to share with other artists how to sustain a creative life, but the other aspect to this is that we not only become empowered and energized, but we as a community can be much more of a force to increase value, especially in this country, which is really really needed, because some of the public forgets, I think, that we contribute to the well-being of others, way beyond the fact that we also contribute to the creative economy in this country substantially. And all of us here as artists have a lot to give and a lot to move forward in free expression and what we can do, especially in this political climate today. So what we're going to do today is we're going to have a moderated conversation as a warm-up to all of you, and then we're going to get into your questions. And I would, and from my experience at Yale, which was very active, people were very opinionated at Yale. I remember my fellow classmates never hesitating to ask questions. So I'm just assuming that how many years has it been since I graduated? 26 years ago is when I graduated, that all of you are going to be maybe the same and ask us questions and get everything out of us, because this is a short time here in your experience at Yale. But I would love for you to keep in mind too, maybe to ask us how to get some things that you may want or need. Everybody here needs something, I'm sure of it. I hear it every day from artists. Artists and venues both need things. I think everyone in the arts needs a lot, actually. So we would love, I'm sure, I'm speaking for all of you, but I'm sure you would love to answer those questions if you could, right?
Sure, of course.
But in the meantime, we're gonna warm up and share a conversation and talk a little bit about our experiences to share them with you. I don't like boring moderated panels, so if you have any questions while we're going, please blurt them out, and I'd love to have more of a conversation. But I have a lot of questions for these amazing women, especially to just start off. Can you all share a little bit about some memories that shaped your life from your time here? I mean, for me, just coming here is amazing because it's so different. I mean, we went to school and things were leaking, and I don't know if you've heard, like, oh my God, I was in my studio, I was worried about my work all the time, I put plastic around it, I mean, everything was decaying, and look at this! This is incredible! What are some of your experiences? Do you want to start, Angie? Tell us a little bit about how this place shaped you, or if it did.
I don't remember a lot of specifics because I think there were a lot of tears and a lot of drinking. I remember feeling like oscillating back and forth regularly between feeling incredibly special and privileged and also like a fraud and really insecure, and I think it's a tough time. I assume it's the same. It's a very competitive environment, and if you're not like tough on the outside in that way, it can feel really uncomfortable. I think what I left the program with feeling like why it was a really incredible program to be part of is that I got to this point where I was making a lot of really bad art the whole time. I was making horrible art, and I was having all these really like whip smart, intelligent people come through and give their really intelligent, amazing opinions of my bad art. And then I got to a point where I was like, F it, like I just have to do what I want to do. And that's like where the program really, I think, provided for me, because I was able to kind of get to that place where like I didn't care about anybody else's opinion, and I really just wanted to do what I wanted to do. And that's when I got the grant, and that's when I made the work that I'm still making today. So that's just a general kind of memory about the program. Sorry.
Hello. Good morning. How long did it take you to get to that place where you just said F it? Public, right? Back to curb it, but
it was a year and a half. It was like it was my January, right before I had to do my thesis exhibition.
While in school,
yeah,
you were like, screw it.
Yeah.
Wow, that's pretty powerful. How about you, Chloe? Like, what are some things of your experience here?
Yeah, so like you were saying that like things were leaking while you were here. While I was here, that was pretty cool. It was eventually, I guess, replaced by where we are right now. It's very clean in here and very confused.
I know, it's amazing.
I went to the college, right? I graduated from undergrad 11 years ago, which feels like my entire life, but also is not that long of a period of time. And we were just talking, and I was saying that I have been back here a little bit, but not to do a public event. And that in a lot of ways, I had to be more sure of myself as a person before coming back here to speak publicly. Because when I was here as an undergraduate student, having been a high-achieving high schooler and a high-achieving college student, I was crippled inside, like honestly wrecked. And there were a lot of different reasons for that, and there's not time to get into all of that. But I think that what I didn't see was how much was kind of being given to me and how much I was taking in, even during that period of feeling completely intensely crippled. I have my BA in theater studies. I did not attend a single art class while I was here. And all I really did was go to things like parties at Hammond Hall when I was on fire.
Oh my God.
So that was the extent of my participation in the art department. But, you know, that was in a lot of ways because of this doubt that I had and my feeling that the type of work that I wanted to make was not somehow eligible for being contained within the discipline of the visual arts or the fine arts. I was wrong. I'm glad that I was wrong. And I think that I was wrong about a lot of things that have all turned out to be a lot better than I imagined. So for everybody who tells you that college is the best part of your life, screw those guys. Like, I hope you're having a great time now. Whether or not you're having a great time now, you're gonna have even greater times later.
So I think I also didn't have the most fantastic time at Yale. But that was not really Yale's fault at all. I was just going through this massive dark night of the soul where I was a dropout from art school in Berlin, and I was like, my parents are right. I should learn to do something serious and professional. God damn it, I'm going to law school. And then I got to law school and I was like, I really don't think this is a mistake, but it was a very expensive mistake at that point. You know, one of those mistakes where you're like, I could just drop out and then I would have a massive amount of debt and no way of ever paying it back. So at the time, I was sort of holed up painting dreadful, large, allegorical paintings about my situation, which seemed to feature a lot of my boyfriends naked and in flames. It's just too humiliating to even think about, and was like, you know, I managed to persuade them to let me take some classes at the art school, and it was just, the whole thing was just a catastrophe. But it really was not Yale's fault. It really wasn't. And
Are you sure?
I really feel that, you know, Yale did its best. You know, they were very supportive. I think they were very kind about the whole situation. And you know, it did mean I got a job at the end, so I had money for the first time, which you know, several years later allowed me to quit working and start being an artist. So it all worked out in the end.
So you were a lawyer for some time.
I was, yes. I mean, I wouldn't have suffered through law school and then not been a lawyer. Some people do that. People do that, but I don't really see the point. You know, that the whole point of going to law school was so that I would have a job, and then once I had the job, I had money eventually, and then when I had money, I could quit and not have a job for a while. Who were just like, you've got to be kidding. And I was like, yeah, they've almost forgiven me now. But yeah, no, it was a very confused time. So I still really feel like I'm glad I learned so much about the common law. It's really a fascinating subject. I highly recommend it to everyone.
So can you all from that though, do you think the education here like helped, hindered, or affected you in any way? It had to, right? I mean, you were talking about your experiences, but after, you did a little bit, Chloe, but yeah. Did you know, Yale has a huge name brand, right?
Yeah, I mean, you want me to talk about name brand or about education?
No, you can talk. I would think you should talk about both. I think it would be interesting.
Yeah, well, okay. I mean, name brand, this will be the quickest story that I tell all evening. I just got a tenure track professorship, and I found out on last Thursday at my new faculty reception, that one of the reasons I got my job is because the president of our college is also a Yale alum.
Oh, wow.
I didn't know that because I was bad at doing research, I guess. That's public knowledge. But he came right up to me at this party for all of the new faculty and was like, Yale girl. I was like, wait, what? So there's that, right?
Fair enough.
Education-wise, you know, I was like the most Yale, right? Like I did directed studies. What was I doing? And I'm not sad that I did that, but I did it because I got a letter that said, you got into this program you haven't heard of, you should do it. And I was like, well, am I even more special than being special? Like, yeah, I'm gonna do it. And I had the opportunity to make so many decisions for myself while I was here, but I didn't make them, right? Like I really followed academic paths that were sort of laid out to me. And that gave me a very intense and wide-ranging liberal arts education that maybe wasn't not always what I liked, but I think that it's actually served me incredibly well as an artist, and especially as an artist making work right now, because there are a lot of ways in which like disciplines of research and writing and communication are valued more in the art world currently than they ever have been before. And when everybody's like, oh, how did you learn to like like, artists are not good writers. How did you learn to be a writer? And it's like, well, I had to write a paper every week on a book I hadn't read for a year, so I got good at that. And I got good at thinking about ideas in certain types of ways that were very beneficial to me.
How about you, Angie, the art world and Yale?
I think that the program was really incredible at preparing me for how hard it can be, how critical it can be. But I didn't get a lot of support in terms of what it meant to do this practically. Like, and this is why your work is so important and why sharing this is so important. I just met someone at the Sharp-Valentis today who said that she graduated in 2015 and they still don't teach that kind of stuff here. And there is this sense that, like, well, you'll just float to the top because you're good and you're worthy. Somehow you deserve it.
No way.
But that's not how it works at all.
No.
Like, at all.
Flat.
And we'll get into that later, I assume.
Yes, we will.
But that's the, and then so I had a really good year the year I graduated here. I got that grant to travel, which was amazing. And then I got into the core program in Houston, Texas, which is incredible residency. I highly recommend it. All of you should apply immediately upon graduation or before. It's a 2-year program. They bring in visiting artists, curators, whatever, but they also treat you like this rock star. Like they bring you collectors that buy work out of your studio that day, and they like bring in artists. I mean, it was like totally dream world, but not reality at all. So when I left that program, I feel like I understood what being an artist really was, which is like alone in your studio. And the phone is getting cobwebs on it, you know, that kind of thing.
So Ellen, you went here for law school, but I mean, do you think that there was some connection? I mean, we were talking in the car on our way here that you took these other programs that was more like a graduate program for you. But what about this education? Is it completely devoid of what have anything to do with what you're doing today?
Well, I mean, I ended up doing the Whitney Independent Study Program, and then I did the residency program that PS1 was doing at the time. And so that sort of provided a kind of artistic community for me in New York, which was incredibly valuable. And at the time, I was just like, I cannot possibly afford to go, you know, once I quit my job, I was like, there's no way I can afford to go to art school. That's just, I was like, I just couldn't face the financial side of it. So I did those instead. And then for years, it was a big secret. I didn't tell anyone that I had gone to law school. I didn't put it on my resume, because I was like, people are going to be like, yeah, whatever, you know, that's just kind of weird. And it was really weird. And then finally, at some point, I was just like, well, but it did actually happen. Like, it's true. Like, I mean, it's weird. And I was like, and then I finally was like, okay, fine, I'm just going to fess up. So I started putting it back onto my resume. For a long time, Yale had no place on my resume at all. Because I was like, whatever. And then the moment it was on the resume, it was amazing because people were like, oh, what the hell? You know, like, what do you mean you went to law school? And then for years I'd be like, well, it has nothing to do with my being an artist. And then eventually I started to become honest with myself, and I was like, actually, as an artist, I'm incredibly interested in like transgression and systems of permission and who's allowed to do what and consensus. And I was like, okay, I am kind of interested in this like larger societal questions, and I think that Yale Law School may be a tiny bit to blame. But then once the cat was out of the bag, it became this incredibly annoying thing where it would be on like every damn wall text, and I would just have to talk about it endlessly. So there was a time when I would be like, I'm not even going to ever bring it up. I was thinking of taking it back off again, but it's too late. It's just too late. I have to live with it.
So speaking of which, permission and access, right? I'm interpreting what things that you're interested in. Would you say you're interested in that? Like the things that you just mentioned. You're blurred. It's a blur now for me. What I just heard, all the things that you're interested in. But what about the fact that Yale, going from this sort of brand? You know, I think we're all privileged because we went to the school, and I think everybody here getting into the school, we're all pretty privileged. I mean, even though it's 25 people versus 16 that get into the painting department, I mean, it's out of how many people apply to go to this school and don't get in? Do you know?
It was like 3,000 when I was 17.
3,000. So that's a lot of people who are excluded from this experience. So that, I mean, and I think in this day and age, we can use that to energize our collective. How would you say, what are some things that young artists can do from being from coming from a place like this that can share that privilege? What do you think? Jump in, anyone.
While here or in the world?
Both.
Yeah, because it's like a very big, wide question.
It is, but I just want to recognize that the fact that, you know, we're here in this place that a lot of other people aren't here, right? And that the education here is, I mean, I think all of us got something from being here, right? I think everybody here probably gets something from being here. How, and especially right now, where the value of the arts are being questioned all the time, much more so since the 1980s when the NEA went south, right? So what can we do as a collective here? What can the students here do and then take this education and do something with it afterwards?
I think it's incredibly difficult to prescribe action to anyone because I think it's such a personal thing. And I feel that, you know, I think looking around what's happening in the world, there's a tremendous need, obviously, for collective action. But I'm not always sure that, as an artist, I certainly try to use what kind of public space I have access to as an artist to make, you know, to raise issues and to create some kind of consensus around those issues. Like, I'm very, you know, I think that's sort of an incredible thing that you have. As an artist, you can make things that people find interesting, if you're lucky. And it's kind of an interesting way for people to approach a question. At the same time, it's not always, you know, it's not always apparent what those ways are. Mm-hmm. I mean, I did the New York Beautification Project where I was painting over graffiti sites in New York as an attempt to kind of raise awareness at the time about how graffiti artists were being targeted based on largely gender and ethnicity. I mean, the whole point of the project was that, like, being a white woman in your 30s is like the ideal demographic to be a public criminal. I was like, that's what that piece was about, or about how to change the aesthetics. It can be, you know, it'll be very differently received. So I think there are a lot of individual things that you can do that show, that make things visible, or that create a space for conversation. You're always going to misspeak, you're always going to say stuff that's rubbish, you're always going to be out there, but I think it is in some ways an individual thing, but artists are communicators. You didn't become an artist because you just wanted to be making stuff for yourself. At some level, you became an artist because you want to communicate with other people. And communication is always imperfect, and whatever you do will go wrong in more ways than you can imagine. But I think that desire to communicate and the responsibility of communication is something that, you know, as an artist, you're so lucky. You're so lucky to have that. And I think it's one that you can use to do things.
You probably
It took me a minute to synthesize it, and it's funny that the word public came up for you because I also thought of the word public, but you thought of public space, and I thought of public school. Mm-hmm. I went here, but before that I went to public school, and after that I went back and got my MFA at a public school, and now I teach at the same public university where I got my MFA. Well, a different part of it, but anyway. Definitely, like, while I was here, one of the reasons that I was upset is because I actually really liked public school. And I didn't really know that I liked it because I hadn't been anywhere else, and so it hadn't really occurred to me that I liked it. I just thought I liked school. And that I felt that there was a kind of way in which I wanted to create a world that looked more like that, but had some of the benefits of this, rather than a world that looks like this and reaches back out towards that. And yes, some people are nodding. And it's a very, very long story of like how and why we do these things. And I don't think that everybody's instinct to creating the type of world that they feel most comfortable in is always the best solution for how to do community engagement, to be honest. It really depends what else you're used to experiencing in your life and the types of things you think about and the types of people you've met and the types of conversations that you have. But in terms of leveraging privilege, to me, the most important thing is sort of like not dropping your privilege on someone else's head and squashing them with it. I think that there's a lot of really good faith efforts that ask people who are in positions of greater power and privilege to help. And I do believe in that, but I also think that a lot of people really know what they need, and they don't really need your help to decide what it is. So the biggest things that I kind of gained from being here actually in some ways were the sense of discomfort that I felt, because it actually taught me a lot about how other people might be feeling. Not to say that my actual experiences here on a practical level were comparable to other forms of discomfort, but that experiencing a great deal of discomfort gave me more imaginative potential to work with other people. And I do a lot of performance work, but I also do a lot of community engaged work, social practice, you can call it whatever you want to call it. And I don't think that that type of work works if you don't have kind of the abstract thinking potential to really, not in an empathic way, but just in kind of like a story weaving way, right? In the way that we deal with a text or the way that we deal with looking at a work of art to interpret other people's experiences as valid and meaningfully different from yours. Empathy asks us more to be the same.
Oh, that's amazing.
What they said.
That's
Angie?
What do you think?
Well, I didn't, when I saw the, Sharon sent us the questions ahead of time. I don't know if I'm giving something away here. But I read it more like I thought you were asking about privilege, sharing it with other artists. I'm kind of like that typical artist who likes to be a little bit introverted and like stay in my studio all the time, not very social. I don't really get to a lot of openings and stuff like that. So, and I live in Allentown. So I think that the best ways that you can kind of help is, you're gonna get your, like little breaks throughout your entire career, right? Like you're gonna get that studio visit with that curator that you've been dying to meet, or it's gonna come out of the blue and you're not gonna know how you got it, and blah, 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 blah. When that happens, say, hey, my friend, right next door also is making some amazing work. If you want to just do a double, visit to save yourself some time, go step in that person's studio. Out there, and I think we're going to talk about sustaining your creative life too. But you can get a house there for $40,000, which means your mortgage is $300 a month, which is very cheap. So
awesome.
Something that we're doing is we bought a warehouse building, and it has tenants up top, so it pays the mortgage, and we're going to start a residency program. So in 2 years' time, you can all hopefully come out and have a residency in Allentown. But I think that there's ways that you need to create opportunities for yourself, and also, share the love, share the wealth, because you never know, that curator that's coming to your studio might hate your work, but they end up loving your friends. And that kind of karma, I think, what goes around comes around. So
It totally does, and I'm really proud that on this tour, because audience members that come to these events in all different cities, people have gotten jobs from this tour. They've gotten exhibition opportunities. I'm helping somebody open a gallery in Chelsea. I'm helping somebody do a residency outside of Duluth, Minnesota on a farm. These all came out from these discussions just by talking about it. Doesn't take that much, actually. It's not much of an effort, actually. But about that, actually, about sustaining creative life, which I love talking about, how do you think leaving here, can everybody here create communities and opportunities to thrive? Like what are some, there's so many ways, but what are some jewels that you might want to share? Chloe, do you have any ideas?
Yeah, I graduated and then there was a recession. Was a bummer. It was actually really, really terrible because from basically June 1st, 2006 until sometime in 2008, I had the kind of attitude where I was like, I got a job, I don't like it, I'll get another one in a week. And that has never happened again. It's never gonna happen again, and that sucks. I'm a little bit glad that I experienced it because now I know what I lost. But the advantage to graduating at exactly that time and getting another job in a week and frankly not taking my employment very seriously at all was that it gave me a lot of space and opportunity to meet and connect with other people. And some of the people that I met kind of in like that random way that you, I think, only meet people when you're between the ages of like 20 and 26. So most of you are probably in that sweet spot, so like do it now. You think it's gonna happen like that forever, and it's not, it doesn't. But some of the people that I met turned out to be the group of people with whom I co-founded Bushwick Open Studios in New York. And I was not making visual art at that time, right? I had like talked myself out of it completely while I was here. I had graduated, having successfully talked myself out of it. I was making theater and working for the Worcester Group, which is a theater company, and I was also working these other random jobs that I would replace every other week when I hated them. And they weren't coffee shop jobs, they were like publishing jobs. It was really a different world. Meeting those people and agreeing to take on sort of what turned out to be, and still haunts me, as a massive amount of work, but having the time and space to do that, and to kind of invent something from scratch, not the neighborhood, but the festival, right? Neighborhood is there, festival happens on top of it. That experience allowed me to actually sustain what became my actual life. My actual life is not as a festival producer. I don't do anything event related now at all. I don't really even support Bushwick Open Studios in its current incarnation, but knowing all of the people that I met through the work I was doing at that time, when I started making art, instead of having the phone with the cobwebs and the long dark night of the soul, instead I had like all of these people who I could inflict myself upon because they had already worked with me when I was in theory running an organization.
Yeah.
And that kind of did everything. So I think keeping in mind that there's like any number of ways to be yourself and to get to the place where you get to make your art that are not just being an artist is really important.
Yeah, I just want to add, I want to read from the book, from your essay for a moment, if you don't mind.
Okay.
So just to follow up, Chloe says Arts in Bushwick, which is exactly the organization I believe that you're speaking of. In its inception, imagined artists not just as creative people, but as good neighbors. I mean, I think that's really important. This inclination towards open friendliness, rather than competitive environments I so often faced and frankly feared, made it easy for me to stick around and see what the group was up to. I quickly learned that sticking around, doing the work that needs to be done, is actually the fastest path towards leadership in a fledgling all-volunteer organization. And then you go on to talk about it further, but I think the core of those sentences that I gather from it and what you just said is being good neighbors and that open friendliness. I think just being open to something where you can exchange and grow is an opportunity, would you say?
Yeah, definitely. And I think, like less and less, so this might be something that you don't relate to, and that'll be interesting for me to hear. But like there was, for a while, I think there was this like, all my creative ideas are secret, and like artists are just like idea hoarders who work in corners and only come out when they're done.
No.
And that sucks. More and more because of social media and the way that it operates, right? We keep fewer secrets. And we run the risk of people stealing our ideas, and it happens. But also, like, if you're doing your idea the best, then it doesn't really matter if someone else also does your idea.
What do you think? Like, you also do a lot of public art, and I think that kind of engagement is a way of in strengthening an artist collective.
Well, I mean, I think that I never really experienced artists myself, honestly, as these sort of aloof creatures, because as somebody who just kind of plunged into the art world, and I am quite a friendly, chatty person, as you might have noticed, other artists who were further along were generous to me. Mm-hmm. The whole reason I started showing was somebody would be like, oh, I'm doing something in some coffee shop, do you want to do it too? I mean, I had no shame. I would show in people's closets. I just didn't care. I was like, this is better than being in an office. I was psyched. I was like, I will do anything. And I would talk to anyone. And so that kind of, the kind of generosity and kindness that people showed me, at the first gallery show I had was because some artist introduced me and they were like, oh, you should meet so-and-so. And the next thing I knew, I was doing a show. That's something that I've always felt, I can give back. The karma of that is a good thing. And I think that part of the reason also that I love being an artist is because I love talking and connecting with people, and my public art and my sort of, I don't know, the gallery and museum art is very much about that. It's very much about seeing art as this thing that at some level is so difficult and yet can be so pleasurable. I think people forget to have fun and forget the fun of like physically interacting with things and with each other, and to me that's, you know, that's a very genuine point of happiness for me, and so it's something that really sustains me, and so I've never found that part of being an artist be particularly difficult. That's always been one of my favorite things, that you can go anywhere in the world and you can be like, half the time there's somebody you want to meet, you can just ring them up or send them an email and be like, so I've always wanted to meet you, can I come and meet you? Most of the time people say yes, I mean, to everyone's surprise, but it's, and people come and visit me all the time too. I actually think that you know, the barriers to entry are there, but at the same time, there's a lot to be said for enjoying the fact that being an artist is kind of a calling card that can get you into a lot of interesting situations, both within the art world and without the art world. You know, so you can end up in places interacting with people, you know, that you would never have anticipated. Where you're like, oh, I cannot believe that I am sitting right here, right now, like with the group of women, the women's transportation seminar. Who would have thought it? You know, you're just like, this is random, but you know, life's an adventure.
That's great. Angie, so you said that you're, you know, you don't go out a lot to these openings, and but yet you want to open this residency program.
I want to bring the artist to me.
Yeah. What about your community?
Very small.
Like, what about? So Angie and I met because I work for Creative Capital and the Joe Mitchell Foundation, and I do these seminars for Creative Capital, and Angie participated in one of them. And then we had a conversation after that, and then we ended up being at the same studio residency program, which we were there today. So clearly you're vested in community then. I mean, even though you sound like you say that you're to yourself, but how's your community really helped you go forward, and what things would you say that could be great for these people to hear, that how to get out there and sustain a creative life?
Well, I think you need to figure out what you're good at, and what where your comfort level is in general in terms of communication. Like, I'm really great one-on-one. I love talking to people like over coffee, just the two of us, because I don't feel like people are staring at me like you are. You know? So I've always had like this kind of artist advisory board, you know, like I have a group of artists that I get together with regularly every 2 weeks, and we kind of talk about, you know, our work, what's happening, gossip, et cetera, et cetera. It started actually after taking a Creative Capital workshop in Houston, you know, 12 years ago. Like we called it Fight Club at the time. It was a group of because I felt like I was feeling marginalized. I was feeling like it was related to gender, and so this was a way to kind of put some power in numbers. So I think other advice that I would give in that situation is to find wherever you're feeling powerless, like how do you change that dynamic and become the empowered one that can then be the benefactor to others. So if you're feeling like no one's like, you're getting rejected from shows constantly or grants or et cetera, like how do you create your own show? You know, how do you curate your own exhibition? Where do you do it? Do you do it in a coffee shop? You can, you know, like you just do whatever. Am I answering the question?
Yeah, I also think that a lot of students, I don't know how you all feel, but I would love to hear, a lot of students think that there are these rules that, and I hate saying the art world, I'm dying to get rid of that term. It's so pretentious, but okay, I'll just say it. The art world, i.e. art community today, has these certain rules that we have to do as artists. I come upon this on this tour, and then with the work in my nonprofit work, that, oh, if I'm supposed to do this way to get in this. I actually don't believe that. I do think that there are some underlying expectations, but I think as artists we're leaders, and I think the ones that lead through and do not care about certain things, like constantly trying to fit a square into a circle, you're not going to get anywhere, because if you're not getting into that circle, what do? You gotta do something. You gotta keep making your work. I mean, I think the best thing about artists is two things. One, three things. One, or many things, but the three top ones. One, I love artists, can you tell? One thing is that we can create things from nothing in our studio, right? We can take something and just create something. We also bounce back from failure better than any other field ever. That's actually been stated a lot. So if we make some kind of, what we see as like an error or something uncomfortable or not right? We can go and change that in our studio, right? And the third thing is, we have that cabal. I call it the artist cabal, where somebody can just walk in and, like you're saying, they'll accept you. And those are amazing assets, if you will, qualities that then we can apply outside of our quote studios in how we forge forward. So I don't know, I just sort of get tired of these rules, especially in an unregulated world. The art world is unregulated.
Sharon, what do you mean by the rules? I'm now imagining this as like artist dating program. I'm sorry.
No, I hear artists say, well, if I show at this place, I'll get to this place. Like if I do X, then I'll show at X. I don't know. Let's think about it. Let me think. Oh, here's one. If I'm in New York, then I will get a gallery. But why should you even care to get a gallery anyway, is the question. And then is the response. I mean, why is it that people want to have that? I think it's just one part of the ecosystem. I don't think it's everything. But I guess steps to take, this sort of fantasy, like if I get in a certain amount of group shows, then I'm going to show at MoMA. These are the things I hear. What do you think about that?
I mean, I think if you don't think that the art world has some sort of like good housekeeping stamps of approval that are very helpful, and if you're here, you've already got a big one.
Yeah.
I think if you don't think that matters, you're probably deluding yourself, because a lot of people are not sure about art and they look for clues like, is this a serious artist? Is this person going to go the distance? And they're looking for clues, and there are different ways that you can. There's more than one way to sort of, I was going to say skin a cat. What an appalling expression. Why did that pop into my head? I'm mortified. To all the cat lovers out there, I'm so sorry. But there is more than one way to get from point A to point B, and also point B can be a lot of different things.
Correct.
So there's more than one. You may end up deciding that you're interested primarily in sort of socially engaged work, or maybe you want to do public work, or maybe you want to have an academic career, or and be more of a theoretician, or maybe you want to be someone who really makes the sort of the fancy luxury good for the gallery, and you're happy in that ecosystem, or maybe you end up doing a combination of them all. It's really it is about sort of sticking it out so that at some point it's obvious that you're serious. I think sort of being able to deal with rejection and failure for a really long time is very helpful. Even my friends who are like out of the box superstars have then had these sort of everything is going great, and then suddenly it's all gone away again. So an art career is always this sort of fragile, wobbly thing. And I think one of the great things to do is to sort of accept that, and to say, well, I'm just going to, I'm going to believe in what I do. I'm going to believe that what I have to say has some value, and I'm going to keep on saying it, and I'm going to figure out a way to make that happen. At the same time, you have to be able to be realistic about the fact that for many people, they won't immediately look to see what you've done. They'll look to see who else has approved of it. And I think that's one of those things that can be quite crushing. But at the same time, it's one of those things you have to accept and just keep going on.
Right. What do you think, Angie? Like, because you've shown a lot of galleries and you show paintings. What do you think about that? The rules.
I think I do think that there is a validation that people are looking for. I think.
Oh yeah, I think that's number one. Yeah.
But I also think that it's really difficult because Pablo has this cartoon that he did for Art Basel last year.
Pablo Becerra.
Yeah, which was like, and then it's a mother reading to her daughter a bedtime story, and it says, and then David Zwerner represented her, and she lived happily ever after. And I'm like, that's exactly like what everyone, like, you know, whether they admit it or not, probably has kind of felt at one point or another, like that if I just get into like the right gallery, I'll live happily ever after. And it's not. You're plodding throughout your whole life, and it's exciting and exhilarating, and also can be like really defeating. So I think the thing that I've learned over the last few years, and like literally just the last few years, is that people are very open to talking. Mm-hmm. Like people that you think there's no way in hell are even going to look at my email mm-hmm. or, you know, talk to me at that party, and they want to hang out. Like it's fine. And then that introduction, that conversation leads to the next thing, leads to the next thing. You can feel really shy, but I think if you be brave, move out into the world, things do happen that way. I think if you're asking about the gallery system, I think I don't think it works very well. Like personally, I don't sell very much at all, to be honest. I actually sell more if I have an exhibition at an institution. That institution might acquire work, and then I have to give 50% to the gallery. So it can be, but they can also be your cheerleader when you need it most. They still give you shows, and they lose money on it too. So it's a partnership. It's a marriage, you know. But I think it's changing. It's changing a lot.
I mean, there's more ways though to exist as an artist, you know, with or without that market base. I mean, what do you think, Chloe?
I mean, I actually think there is only one way. Like, make art.
Exactly.
Just, like, keep making it.
Yeah.
And then when no one wants to show it, like, make it again and make some more and make it better. And, like, man, I made so much bad art. Like what you said, like you're, like, bleeding your veins out. And wow. Yeah, I don't have a gallery.
Right.
I have a lot of shows. I have worked with major institutions. I don't really know how that happened, which is not helpful advice. But also, maybe it's a good thing to keep in mind that sometimes we don't know exactly how things have happened.
Exactly.
It's like a combination of the good housekeeping stamp, the friend saying, so-and-so, you should go see so-and-so, the email you wrote, the thank you letter you sent, something random you said one time in the audience at a panel. Truly, that has happened to me 2 times. That I was upset at an event like this one or another type of panel, and I got my chance for Q&A, and I said my angry question, and then someone came up to me afterwards and was like, "Who are you?"
Be angry now? From the audience?
You know, I don't know. It is knowing what you're good at and like not trying to be the thing that you're not.
Exactly.
Because disingenuous art is bad, and even if it looks really good, it just doesn't feel very good to anybody. And you might sell a lot of it really quickly at one point, but you're not going to feel great. And like people are then going to ask you to make that forever. So don't get stuck making something you don't want to make, and just make a lot of stuff.
That's where I think that artists are leaders, is that if they stay true to their vision. So the last question before I open up to everybody is, how do you all sustain your creative lives yourself? Like, Chloe, do you want to continue, like, your teaching?
And teaching?
But you do a lot of other things. Can you talk about them?
I'm making art.
Well, of course.
I'm making different types of art. Like I'm doing long-term socially engaged projects in different cities all around the country, and I've also done some abroad, but I also make studio art. I write a lot. I write as part of a creative practice that becomes part of my visual artwork, but I also write articles, and I just co-edited a book that's coming out in 2018. And how am I sustaining my creative life? I don't sleep enough, which makes it hard for me to remember things. And it's not admirable. I would like to sleep more. You know, I still live in the city where I was born, right? And I don't understand really how anybody moves to New York. I think that sounds really hard still. But since I was born and raised there, it has been easier for me to live there. And I think just like finding the place where you feel supported by your community is more important than finding the place where you think you're supposed to be. So I don't live in New York because I want to be like a New York artist. I live in New York because I'm a New Yorker and my whole family lives there. And if it wasn't working for me, I'd go somewhere else. And there's a lot of other places that you can be that are like great, actually, really amazing. So figuring out like what you want to make and where you want to be to make that, rather than what seems correct. Like, you guys are obviously really good at doing the right thing. You're here. So take that as a baseline, but then like use it for adventures.
That's great. Angie, how do you do that?
Same thing, kind of traditional path where I teach out in Pennsylvania. When the economy crashed, I had a studio and an apartment here, and we bought a house in Allentown right before the economy crashed. So we had to pack up ship and move everything to Allentown. But that's actually ended up being a blessing because, as I mentioned before, you can get real estate for really cheap. So a $30,000 house, you fix it up, you rent it out to a tenant, you make $1,000 a month. The mortgage is only $300 on it. It ends up being pretty good math in the long run. So that helps pay for things like daycare and my studio space in New York, because I think it's really important to maintain that connection for me. But Allentown's a city much like New Haven, so there's opportunities for community there, but also opportunities to kind of support yourself in ways that are a little bit more creative. I do lectures, grants, those kinds of things too, but yeah, and that's the long game. The real estate thing's a long game. We haven't broken even yet. But.
Ellen?
Well, I was very lucky because I used to do, when I started out in the summers, I would work, like 3 summers I worked for my old law firm, which was fantastic in the summer. So I had this great summer job, and then I was like disqualified because I didn't do continuing legal education, and I had to stop that. But then I ended up taking over this big loft space, and I rented out studios to people for a long time. That was how I supported myself. And then later, I started to make money, which was amazing. I couldn't believe it. So I sold work. I work with several galleries. So I sold work, but I also started getting a lot of commissions after having a kind of career as an illegal public artist. I kind of went legit, and I started having a lot of like large-scale public commissions. And that has continually been a thing. With gallery income is very up and down. Like sometimes you'll be like, this is amazing. Like, I'm going out and buying some big earrings now, or else you'll go and you'll be like, oh, I just spent like a year working on the show and I have sold 0. Mm-hmm. So it's really hard, and especially I have a kid, I'm also married. So that sort of income, it had to be said that doing public art was amazing because I love making things that are not just for this sort of super wealthy ecosystem. So I don't see why things in the public realm shouldn't be like beautiful and amazing and interesting. Like, why the only things we put on our modernist buildings, like adverts, like is that all we are, consumers? I think, so I love making public art, but I also love the fact that I have a contract and then I get paid, and that's really relaxing because then I'm like, okay, whatever happens with the gallery show. Or then I'm also commissioned a lot by institutions, but that doesn't normally make that much money. So it's a bit of everything. I also lecture, and I also am visiting artists a lot. So I kind of cobble it together from a lot of different sources and grants as well. So, but yeah, it's always been a patchwork, and I'm very lucky because my loft got covered by the loft law in New York, so I have a place to live that I can afford, and that has been obviously a huge piece of good fortune. So, but yeah, it's a mess,
Well, from my books and the research I've done for my books, the keys to sustain a creative life are the following. Number 1, lower your expenses to their rock bottom, essentially. The people who sustain their lives with ease have, let's say, their real estate pretty much figured out. And the second thing is, I always say this, there's no such thing as rejection, it's only a difference of opinion. You get hurt when somebody yells at you, or your mom or your boyfriend or girlfriend dumps you or something. But like, as far as a professional opportunity and you don't get that, it's so random. It's so random that it's not personal, usually. And I think the other key is that the artists I know who thrive and sustain their creative lives just are persistent. They apply for everything, but they're also givers. I believe if you have an opportunity, you must share it. And generosity yields generosity. So those are some of the keys. Oh, and by far, make the best work that you can. That's like the biggest key of all of it. Okay, so now we're going to open it up to all of you. Did you think about my question? Do you remember it? Want and need? Anybody want to start, or I'll just call on you?
Or like be an angry panel person.
Yes.
Yes,
Go on.
speak out. Look, it's just us. That's it. There's nobody else, nobody here. Oh, and all the way to the left, and then you. Go ahead.
Gallery versus web, internet.
What do you mean by that? Can you expand on that?
You're saying, artwork in galleries versus now what's going on with the internet, having your art on the web pages.
Are you saying the pros and cons to both of them?
Well, yeah. Or
Are those
just
two
ways
things
to get
in
into both of
opposition?
them.
Yeah, they tend to be linked,
Yeah.
in my experience.
Oh,
Yeah,
can you?
because years ago, you would bring your artwork to somebody. Now it's, let me just see your webpage or.
Oh, I see.
Oh,
Oh, the way to
Yes.
see work.
Yeah, that's one.
Digital.
Yeah.
Yes.
But also the fact of selling over the web versus, giving a percentage to a gallery.
Oh, well, I think if you have a relationship with a gallery, depending on what terms that you decide, the artist also has a say in that business relationship. The artist has a responsibility to work on this, not just give up the power to the gallery. So if you go to the gallery and say, what are the terms that you're familiar with? These are the things I'd like to bring to the table and what I want out of this. I think every relationship is different. I think there are similarities through all of these relationships. However, I believe that there are differences as well. As far as selling work through the internet, a lot of galleries do that through Artsy and but as an extension of their sales that comes from the galleries or art fairs, etc. I actually think it's quite common now, or curators look at Instagram often. What do you all think?
I feel really bad for a lot of galleries, especially the mid-level galleries,
Yeah.
because I think they have a really hard go at it right now. They have to go to these fairs or
Yeah.
they'll fail. They have to, I had a friend who had a gallery on the Lower East Side who had to sell $300,000 a month
Yeah.
just to break even. So, you think you have sleepless nights. Like, I
Yeah.
can't imagine that.
Yeah.
So I have a lot of empathy for gallerists
Oh,
who
I
are
do
willing to
too.
kind of take that on, for sure.
Completely agree.
But I think, you guys are at the beginning, you can do whatever. Like, you can just, whatever opportunity comes to you and just throw it all at the wall or whatever the saying is, see what sticks. I think, it's a fun time. It's a scary time, but it's going to be a really fun time for you because you're not locked into anything.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have these relationships with certain galleries and you agree to terms that they should always be malleable, but if you sign a contract, they might not be.
Can I just expand on that? Why did you ask that question? I'm curious.
I'm a photographer, and I'm just from, back, like 30 years ago, you went with your portfolio somewhere,
Right.
Now it's like.
That's over.
Yeah, no, I know. Well, and I've been out of the art business for a while, I'm just trying to think about going back into it again, so.
Any
And
thoughts?
now everything's on the, internet now, it's just a big
It's
thing,
true.
on your webpage,
Any thoughts or comments about that as far as access and linking those two things together?
I mean, I think that you have a responsibility. Part of your public presence is to have a website that does what you want it to do. So in my case, I'm interested in having people know kind of the scope of my work. I don't sell from my website, but that's because I have a relationship with galleries, and they would be really cross if I did that. They sell things on the web, but I think that there's room for a lot of different models, and I think that you're right. When you're starting out, there's no way you can do it however you like. I know there's no reason why you have to. If you make something that's an edition, you can sell 100 of them. You don't have to just sell 3 and have them be really expensive. There are different ways that you can work with these things, and I think it's great to be inventive with this sort of thing and to play around with it. But it's also, I think, you have to, once you have relationships, you have to also take those relationships seriously. So,
Yeah.
I can't undercut people I'm working with by then selling either directly out of my studio or on the web.
Well, unless you have an agreement to that. Like I think there are some galleries that, let's say, are out of state or what have you, that there's some kind of agreement, like for example, your public art projects, if you get your public art projects right, the dealer doesn't get a cut of that.
No, that's because that's work that I do on my own. If they were involved and if they got me the project,
Right.
it would be a different situation.
Right.
So, but each artist has a different relationship with
Correct.
their gallery, obviously.
Chloe, do you have any thoughts?
Not that are significantly different from what's already been stated. I mean, I think, I guess just emphasizing again that it is a public life.
Yeah.
And so if you're unavailable, no one will find you.
So sad. You had a question, yes.
Sort of touching upon the topic of like rules concerning like artists, etc. How did you find the transition from school where everything's sort of structured and regimented and feeling like, oh, you should do this in order to get to X, Y, Z, and then coming out into the public world, how did you find that transition? Did you find it liberating? Did you find it scary? Like, again, can you elaborate on that process?
Angie, you want to start?
Me? No, I start all the time.
Okay. Chloe?
Yeah, sure.
Jump in.
Yeah,
I don't
well,
care.
you know, I did it, twice, right? Like, I got out of undergrad and my parents are still making fun of me. I was like, I'm never going to go to grad school. And I was really adamant about it. And so I embarked on a life that had no grad school plans. So I really thought I was going to be doing my real life. And then I did go to grad school in 2009 because, again, 2008 economy, toilet. So both times that I left school, both after undergrad and after getting my MFA, I did feel both of the things that you kind of described, liberated, scared, right? But what I realized is that if you need somebody to tell you what to do, you can tell yourself what to do. So there was a point when I had just graduated from grad school where I was really not excited about the things ahead of me and how I didn't know how to do them. So I started two things, actually. I started a salon in my house called Make Work Every Week, where I would cook an extensive dinner for anybody who was willing to come every week and show the work that they were working on, which also forced me to make things every week, including dinner. And I also started a project which became kind of the first step of a much longer work that then became the body of work that was my first solo show in New York, but I didn't know that at the time. I had no aspirations to doing this. And it was just a daily practice of recording my daily environment with my most daily camera, which was the camera in my phone. I didn't have a good phone. And all of those things are structures that exist, right? We do them already for things like Instagram, but we don't think of them as labor. And there was a way in which I was able to start thinking of very everyday activities as labor and make them meaningful and make them intentional that gave me some of the structure that I was missing when I wasn't that excited about my life. Undergrad, it was just like, yippee. You know, I've been in school since pre-K. I'm like, I'm free now. I can do anything. What day is it even?
I think both of those things that you said are correct, because I mean when I came out of undergraduate, it was like I fell off a cliff, and then I basically lived back at my parents' house and worked as a receptionist in a factory that made screws. That was not a great career option. And then I went to Berlin and talked my way into art school there. And then I was really lost. And then after that, after I left law school, I was a lawyer very briefly, because that's what you were meant to do. And then when I quit that, I still remember this sort of feeling of like terror, because I was like, everyone I know is telling me I'm a complete idiot. And the first week, I remember just sat there and I literally watched television for a week. I just ordered in pizza and watched TV for an entire week and just thought about how I had ruined my life. And yet I remember feeling very happy. And then at the end of the week, I was like, okay, now I'm done with the TV aspect of my life. And then I was just like, and I had this like list. I was like, every week, I was like, well, I'm going to make so many things happen every week. And I just went out to absolutely everything. And I talked to everyone, and I said yes to everything. And it was surprising how well it worked. I was actually And then I kind of got used to this idea that I never knew what was going to happen next. And part of it is like, it's such a change from your life as a student where you always know what's going to happen to that moment where you're suddenly have no idea what's going to happen. And you just have to be kind of radically open. And this is one of the great terrors and pleasures of being an artist, is being open to the world, I think. And it's one of those things that either you will really love or you will decide that you need more structure in your life, and then you will create some kind of structure for yourself. But at that point, it's your life. So that's kind of a fabulous moment.
Yeah, and I'll say one other thing actually about privilege, right? Returning to that is like, privilege actually means that it is harder to screw up your life in ways that are irreparable. That's not fair, but it's true. So congratulations. It's been, every time I think I've totally screwed up my life, I was not correct about that. And that is something that you have now, so do with it what you will.
Angie, what happened when you left?
This is why I should go first, is because they're so like brilliant and eloquent. Like to follow them is really frustrating. What happened when I guess I was just going to give some practical stuff. Like, I'm a fan of the soft landing. So whatever that means for you, if it's people, move with people. If it's having more time to make your work, get a job where you're just waiting tables and you're not being like sucked in mentally into something that, or if it's you're not great at communicating with others but you want to network, get a job in the art world working for someone that is really good at that, you know.
But what happened to you?
What happened to me?
Yeah, was it what happened when you graduated?
After Yale?
Yeah.
Well, I went to the core program.
So that's what
I
you said.
Like I had
Right.
I had the dream.
And
that
then
this
after that.
And I thought it was just going to be like that forever. And then
Right.
I moved here and I had my solo show at PPOW, and not a single thing sold.
Right.
And I internalized that for 5 years and thought I was a
5
failure.
years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was, but you know, that was the economy tanked. So I can, you know, but I didn't actually, you know, of course it was me, not the economy tanking, not like all the rich people losing all of their money too, which is what happened then. I mean, that's why it was so painful. I mean,
Or some of their money.
yeah.
It's all relative.
That's true, that's true.
When I graduated, I had all that debt, and I moved to New York with my friends, because that's what we all did, and moved to Williamsburg, and then I took an office manager job at a lighting design company, because I couldn't afford to buy a computer. So I thought, where am I going to work to use a computer to apply for things to get out of that? So every day I stayed afterwards thinking I was doing overtime, but I really wasn't. I was applying for things every single day and got my first teaching job that got me out of it, and that's how I got forward. But also the person I worked for is one of my very best friends, who I've known for 26 years, and he's an incredibly self-made man, so he grew as I grew. And then I had a house fire in 2013, and we moved to Minneapolis, and I kept working in New York. And he's so wealthy that he had an extra apartment in the West Village and gave it to me to stay for 3 years until I moved back to New York, so you never know. So it's keeping in touch with people and befriending them, I think, but also positioning yourself in a place where it benefits you to think in advance so that you can go forward. That's what I think is a good plan.
And what's he doing now?
What's he doing now? Oh, I can't tell you. Well, oh yeah, I can tell you.
Okay.
I am helping him open a gallery in Chelsea because he has the means to do it. He's heard me for so many years talk about sharing his privilege. He has a lot of money, and I say, you better do something. And he loves the arts and creativity, and he's a designer himself. So he has all of this real estate in front of his offices, and he's opening a gallery on October 13th, and I'm helping him, and I'm getting him studio visits and vetting the artist with him so that it can thrive. I'm volunteering to do that. Yes?
So as a student that's about to graduate, I mean, there's a lot of us here, but I mean, as I guess Chloe said, as a Yale student, you're not told no very much a lot before we come
Wow.
here.
Yeah.
While
You're ready
we
for
are
that.
here, like, we aren't told no very much a lot, but I think we need to strengthen ourselves and kind of steal for that no. And I know your people are told no a lot in the real world. How do you kind of ready yourself for that, and how do you deal with it when the no's come at you in waves?
Oh my God.
Okay, so real talk. This is maybe about like a year and a half ago, and it was one of those snotty party situations, and somebody came up to me and said disingenuously, like, "You're everywhere, how do you do it?" And I was like, "Well, I applied for 80 things last year and I got 5. And you now think I'm like amazing, right? But like you did not see the back end of my 75 rejection letters. I don't think that you can rehearse for that. And the first couple of times that it happened to me, I cried, and it took me like a week to get over it, or longer, right, depending on what it was. And now I would say I still get a lot of rejection letters, right? It takes me like an hour. Like for an hour, I'm like pretty, if it's something that I spent a huge amount of time applying for, like the Creative Capital application, if you're a finalist, you've been applying for that thing for a year. And when I was a finalist and I didn't get it, I was back to my like week to a month of recovery.
Oh.
But that was a very particular situation where I had put a huge amount into it. And then after my week to a month of recovery, I'm not going to tell you which, I realized that all of the things that I had put into that application I could actually use in other applications, but it took me like that much time to be resilient about it. But for the most part, you just get better at applying for stuff too. So it doesn't feel like that's actually your creative work anymore. So now it's like it takes me an hour to get over being rejected for something, but it also only takes me like half a day tops to submit the application. And it used to take me like a month to do the application, and so then I'd also be recovering for a month. And so I think it's just like doing it, and realizing that some opportunities that are good opportunities are not good opportunities for you or for your work, right? Like I do have a photographic practice, but applying for photography grants doesn't work for me. And it's not because people don't want to print or buy my photographs. It's because the way that I work is kind of a little bit complicated in the context of those applications, and there's no way for me to show that or talk about it.
Angie, how do you deal with no's?
I just apply. I think it's the numbers game.
Yeah, I do too.
Like just
I
applying,
agree.
so, because then you always have something that you could be getting instead that might be much better. Like I was a finalist for the Provincetown residency at the same time that I got the Sharp Valentis, which means that like one was clearly better for me than the other. Like I like to have a like the universe is delivering the right thing. Like that makes me feel better. On some of these juries, and you just once you see the back end of that side,
I have to. All
you
those
realize
sides.
like oh, just how much of a kind of
Random.
this person really loves the color red or what, and like it can't even be that like I don't know. I mean, it's not that simple, but I'm just saying like everyone has their
No, not to interrupt you, but like I actually just was a finalist for something else, and they said all the finalists can request feedback on their proposal. I was like, can I handle it? Okay, I'm gonna do it. Got the feedback. Finalist. 3 jurors, 2 of whom I personally know. Got anonymous feedback from all 3 people, and one of them was like, this work has too many words in it, and I personally do not like to read in an art gallery.
Oh.
That's okay, because I'm not going to make work without words in it.
Yeah, right.
But it was also like the level of dedication that they could give even to people who were finalists was like that. That wasn't an excerpt of what they wrote, that was what they wrote.
That was it.
That was it. So it's really, it's not about you. Sharon said it before, it's not.
Yeah.
But you will hear it all the time. And so just like have your thing that you do. Like if you throw a plate out your window and it makes you feel better, then just make sure you have a safe street to throw a plate
I was just gonna say
onto.
feel the feelings too.
Yeah.
Like you gotta feel it too.
Ellen, what about you? How do you deal with them?
Well, I think the ability to deal with rejection is probably the most useful thing you can have as an artist, because you will be rejected all the time, and you will make work all the time that other people will not like, or violently object to, or make fun of, or so you not only will you apply for a lot of things, and I've been on the back end of those panels, so I now never take those rejections personally, because I'm just like, really? I remember being in some panel where someone was like, oh, no, we can't have this, because I look at it and I feel dizzy. I said, really? It's a great piece of art. So I don't take it personally at all when I'm rejected from anything like that. But I think the other thing that, so that's a numbers game. You have to keep applying, and the more things you get, the more things you will get. It really is as simple as that. But I think on the other side of it, you have to deal with the larger, and I think sometimes more wounding rejection, that you will make work that you love, that you believe in, that was the best you could make, and maybe nobody else will like it or think it's worth anything. Maybe they'll even be right. That's the worst thing when you look back and you're like, oh my goodness, that really was a terrible piece. That's totally right. So that will happen. People will write about your work and mock it, and you will go to bed. I still am not a person, I can't deal with bad reviews. Like I have my husband honestly read them to me, and I read them and then sort of paraphrase them. He's always like, it's good. I'm like, great. I don't need to see any more. So I think that's just something that you have to be okay with. And at the same time, think about it when you visit your friends and your peers' studios. There are people out there doing work that will not mean anything to you. You'll say, this is pointless to me. You never know. In 10 years' time, you might say, oh, that piece was amazing. What was wrong with me? Why didn't I like it? And show yourself the same generosity. Because some of the things that you make that you think are a failure will turn out later to be pieces that you'll say, I'm so glad I did that. And maybe some of those pieces will always remain a failure for the world at large. But who cares? We're all human. All we do is fail and fail and fail again until we die. So let's just enjoy it. Failure is a good thing. And it's something that we shouldn't give other people too much power over it. One of the great things about being an artist is having a voice. Most people don't get to have any kind of voice in our society. You have a bit of a voice. Maybe it's not a huge voice, but it's a tiny voice, and you should say it. And you know what? Some of the stuff you're going to say afterwards, you're going to wish you hadn't said it. But that's human. That's what it is to be a human being.
I think the other thing is to keep in mind that there's a big difference between perception and reality in the art world. No question about it. I think people sometimes too, when they receive those no's, look at the people who are getting things. I personally do not believe in competition whatsoever, because I think every single person does something different, and I embrace the people who receive things as much as if I'm really stinging from something I'm not getting that I would like to get. And I do know for a fact from doing all the research for these books, and then 2 more after this, that I'm in the thick of right now, is that everybody's on the same page. The people who may perceptually seem to be, quote, successful, and you can define what that is for yourself. There's a lot of definitions that come from that word. But those people who you deem to be successful may be struggling just like you are. And I will say that I'm not speaking for Jeff Koons. I personally have disdain for him for many reasons, but I think he could do a lot. The 1% for artists who are doing tremendously well financially could give back to the 99%. That's my problem with him. But nonetheless, I am talking about that level of, let's say, people who are publicly acknowledged for whatever reason. They also have to manage their studios. I'm not saying you feel sorry for them, just breaking this down a little bit. They manage their studios, delegating things, they're doing different things. But I'll never forget, a very good friend of mine who's deceased, who died last year, showed at Pace, and I went to his studio in the Bronx, and I asked him, gosh, you must be doing really well. I fell for that this was a couple years ago, that perception thing. And he said to me, are you kidding me? I owe them money. I'm not doing well. I'm not selling my work. They've given me stipend for my work, and I'm having to pay it back. So it doesn't matter in the end where people are showing or what they're doing. you never know what they're really going through. So I don't think it's good to compare. I'm not saying that you're doing that, but sometimes people feel that way when they get those no's. Okay, other questions? Yes.
Hi, my name is Natalie. I'm a second year painter here. I'm also a mom, and I was just wondering if you guys had any advice as mothers. I know there's two for sure.
Two for sure.
Yeah.
And there's a lot in my books, by the way.
Or just words of encouragement. Anything that you have to share, because I'm getting ready to graduate in May.
How old are your kids or kids?
4, 6, and 18.
Oh, God bless you for that.
Wow.
Thank you for doing that.
You're a hero.
Oh, you're welcome.
I think it's the hardest job in the world to be a mother. I could not do it. I think it's amazing. What do you think, Angie?
Just bring them with you. Daycare, you know, like there's that. Hire out as much as you can in general. Like the things that you don't want to do anymore, cleaning the house, cooking dinner, if you can afford it, you know, find a way to help or lean on family or whatever. I do think it's more difficult, and I think, I don't know, you know, your partner's situation, but I think a lot of that falls on the woman too, or at least even just conversations about it fall on the woman. Like when you're out at a gallery, people are like, how do you do it? And it's like, my husband's right here. He's also an artist. No one's asking him that question.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, I don't know. Ellen, you can kind of chime in.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely had some very interesting experiences when my son was born, where a collector who shall remain nameless was just like, oh, I can't believe you've had a kid. You're never going to make any work again. And he like canceled like a sale of 5 pieces.
Oh.
He's like, you're going to have like 5 more and you'll lose all interest in it. And I was like, his wife was standing next to him. So
Did she say anything?
No.
Ooh.
So I mean, it's definitely, I think being a mother, and I don't know if you agree with this, but I think that it's quite diametrically opposed to the sort of public persona that people think an artist should have, which is like this sort of crazy person who's like, you know, they're out all night. It's very difficult to do with children. And so I did a lot less socializing once my son was born. I really prioritized work. So I was like, either I was with him or I was working. I took him absolutely everywhere. But that's possible with 1. 3, I had a lot of, I had a young art student who was my assistant after Toby was born. That was the first time that I really had an assistant, because I realized that I needed another pair of hands to do the things that I couldn't do. And I also took, you know, I became a much tougher negotiator. Before that, I was much more willing to be like, yeah, of course I'll do that. And then after that, I was like, yeah, but that's going to involve like babysitting. If you want me to do that, I need more money. So I became a much, much harder negotiator. And obviously, you know, my husband was and has been incredibly helpful. But I think that there are more and more women artists, and I think that it you know, you know, we have something to say too. And I think that I think it's very important to say, yeah, that's a big part of my life, but it's not all of my life. You know, I'm a person, I have children, but that's, you know, that's just a part of my life. And I think that, you know, maintaining your own self-importance for yourself goes a long way to persuading other people, and taking yourself seriously and saying, well, what do I need? What's the minimum that I need to keep working as an artist, and how on earth can I make that happen? My studio is at home for a long time. I now have a big project, so I have another studio. But before that, I worked always at home. I had a home studio, and I just did what I had to do. And there'll always be people for whom you won't fulfill their kind of dream of whatever they think an artist should be because of that. And you kind of have to be okay with that.
Well, I think it's doing things like this though, like bringing your baby and sitting on a panel that helps, like.
Yeah, I took Toby
down,
Toby to so many panels, and yes.
It's like a normal, like I heard this story when I was actually not, like I just got out of grad school, that Michelle Grabner, who is a force of nature, she's amazing.
In my first book.
I heard that she was like on a panel in Barcelona breastfeeding her child, and I was like, ew. And then I was like, that's actually fucking badass. Like, no. So I was like, at first disgusted, and then I was like, wait, I have to examine that. Like, where is that coming from? Why do I think that? And then I thought, no, like, that's really important. Like, we need to see more of that. So, you know, just practically speaking too, I think like bartering with other artists who are also parents helps. Like, if you can't afford childcare or any of that other stuff, like if someone's really good at cooking, they like deliver the food, and someone else like takes the kids for a whole day, you know, like power in numbers. It's a lot easier when like, you know, 3 of my friends in my studio have their 4-year-olds and they're all playing in the corner and we can all be doing our work. Do you know what I mean? So, anyway, I cut that
It's
off.
cultivating that community. Anyway.
What I was gonna say, I'm not a mom, but my mom is an artist. So I from the kids' perspective, I can now like weigh in and say all the things that they are saying is what my mom did. And not only did it work for her, but it really worked for me, right? And it was actually really amazing to go with her everywhere. And she didn't, unfortunately, breastfeed me on a panel, but that would have been really cool if she did. But you know, who babysits your child? And she was like, whoever's in the SBA silkscreen studio when I'm there. And like, she was just sort of constantly packing me up with like my little activities so that she could have the time that she needed. And that worked for me as a person. I don't think that that works for every child, and I don't know your children. I'm sure they're amazing, but people have all kinds of personalities and are amazing. But like taking the risk to do it, I will say not every art environment loves kids, but like a lot of them do. And I'm now having friends who are having children, and I love to spend time with their kids. And so sort of accepting that that could be a nice part of someone else's life and not feeling embarrassed or ashamed about it, I think would be like really great for you and probably for your children.
Like I come from a community where it's all about like women and children, and it's a normal part of life, but like here is different.
Yeah.
There's a lot different. It's just kind of navigating these spaces and being smart about it.
Yeah, and it's the same as like picking a place to live. It doesn't have to be New York. It's the place that works for you in your work, right? Picking the places to make your art can be related to the fact that being a mom is part of your life, and your life is part of your work, and your work is the work that you make that's important.
I think also, if you have a pen and paper or give me your email address, I can send this to you. Lenka Clayton is an amazing artist who's in this second book, and she started a free residency for mothers called the Artist Residency in Motherhood, and that's online, and you can ask.
Like, when have you become legit in terms of whatever you do? So.
You mean go off of the IRS's definition of hobby?
Yeah.
There was just a court case.
Or claiming income if it's not like frugality.
Well, I did it straightforward when I graduated and never even thought about hobby. Forget it. So I ignored that, but I was audited twice in my life. I've been audited twice. One time I was really angry because it was right after 9/11, which I experienced. I lived a block and a half from the World Trade Center, and then the IRS audited me during that time. I would love to cuss right now, so much anger. But I took it as an art project, and I told my accountant, welcome to my audit. And I made it into something, but it cost me $3,500 each time doing that. But I think that I learned the other day, I just talked to somebody yesterday who manages taxes for artists, who's an artist. And I said, why do you think artists get audited sometimes? She said, when there's big losses, those are big flags, and that's what happened to us. But I think the hobby thing is not it's not as, I don't know your experience with this, but I don't think that's, I don't think the qualifications of selling at a gallery is something that the IRS, I mean, you mentioned that, but I don't think that the hobby thing, I think you just do it when you get out. I think your exhibitions being audited for me is that they wanted to know consistent exhibitions and that I was being consistent at being an artist, period. It didn't.
Like, even the difference between like sole proprietorship or whatever other options there are for.
Well, that's a huge question. Well, I think you should talk to an accountant.
And then one other question is, I'm just curious habits you guys have developed in terms of just being organized in your studio, whether it's like cataloging, how you inventory your things so you keep track of them, or when they start going out in the world.
What do you think? Briefly.
Well,
That's a
I'm
big
going to
question.
say that if you can start being organized now, that is a tremendously good idea. Speaking as someone who was not organized and almost adequately organized, but then, you know, I've spent the last year trying to create a database of where my work is. I did a big book, and for that I had to find images of all these pieces going back 15 years. The more organized you can be now, you'll thank yourself later. And now you have time. Like now you have no, you know, realistically, you have no excuse not to be organized when you're starting out. At the beginning, you should be organized. And then of course you get busy and then you're less and less organized. So I think you know, maintaining a database of where your work is, documenting things properly. I wished afterwards there were pieces I never found again. I couldn't remember who bought them. I had like a bad snapshot that I took of it because I didn't have money to pay a photographer at the time. You know, I had like all these pieces, so I was like, oh, I wish this could be in the book, but I only have this sort of rubbish, blurry photograph of it, and I don't know who has it. So be organized now, but then, yeah, otherwise you have to create a structure that works for you. I mean, my life is, you know, I take my son to school, I start work in the studio, and then either I or somebody else picks him up, and in the afternoon, you know, I try to work until about 6, and then I cook dinner, and then either I go out or I don't. I mean, that's my life is sort of quite, you know, it just depends on what I'm working on, but I pretty much work every day. There's never a day when I'm not working.
Chloe, how do you organize your life?
I can only learn from this question. I'm putting together, like I don't know where half the work is. So that's a thing that can happen to you, and you won't know that it's happened until it's happening, and then you will feel the way that I feel now, which is bad. But I am organized in other aspects of my life. I'm like financially organized because I have big bad money paranoia, which is the result of being raised by a like lower class New Yorker and an immigrant. So you inherit big bad money paranoia, and then you get really financially organized as a result, which is great. And how I got financially organized was just through like sheer force of will and ongoing habit. So I imagine that I could probably get my studio organized in the same way, but it would be something that I would have to do every day. Like I have financial paranoia every day, and I just learned to live with it. So some other type of, perhaps this terrible crisis that I'm currently in is going to be the motivator to get everything else together.
Yeah, I have the same kind of advice. I work backwards from deadlines. That helps if you have deadlines set up in place. I'm kind of a bank hours kind of gal too. Like I like the 9 to 5. Other people, you know, just reverse that right through the night. There's like software, tons of software now, which is so incredible that you can find to help organize all of the ways in which Ellen was describing your studio, where your work, where it is, etc. And then for the financial thing, with what will really help with the IRS is if you sign up for something like mint.com. It's a free app. You connect it to your bank accounts. It's totally secure, but it'll essentially like catalog where your expenses are, you know, like Dick Blick or wherever, you know, if you go out to eat with a collector, you can modify it in there. So it really helps kind of keep track of where your expenses are going when it comes time to IRS, and you just export it, and anyway, that's a practical tip.
So I think we're out of time, right? But we're going to stick around. We have books that we're selling here if you'd like to buy a book, and we'll sign them. But we're also here to answer questions for a little while. Are you all open to that? I want to thank Lisa for having us. I know this can continue on. I'm continuing on this tour. If you're interested, you can go to livesustaind.org and can continue this conversation at every event. We actually have 4 events coming up in New York City in the next 2 weeks. So if you happen to be down there, I know when I went to Yale, I always went down to New York for stuff like that. It's clearly accessible. But anyway, and I'm sure you can stay in touch with these amazing women. Thank you all very much for coming here. Thank you
Thanks for having
very
us.
much,
Thank you,
Lisa,
Lisa.
for having
Yeah,
us.
thanks.
Lovely meeting you. If you want to stay in touch, you can always, I always say this to everybody, you can always email me. I will email you back. It may take me 3 weeks. I'm about 3 weeks behind right now, but I will always be happy to email you back. Thanks again. We'll be here for a while if you want to come up and say hello.